Imagine the following. Every month, in an elegant Swiss city surrounded by mountains, representatives of more than 60 of the most powerful financial institutions on the planet meet in a building inaccessible to the public. No cameras enter. No journalists are invited. There, in marble halls and absolute silence, the minds that control the global financial system discuss something that could completely change the way we buy food, pay for a house, or save money for retirement. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. And what they decide in those meetings can rewrite the future of money as we know it. Think for a moment. When was the last time you doubted whether your money would be accepted tomorrow? Probably never, right? That confidence comes from decades of absolute dominance of the US dollar. It has become so central to world trade that it's almost impossible to imagine an alternative. But what if, secretly, those central bankers were planning exactly that? A world where the dollar ceases to be the currency everyone desires. We're not talking about small changes in interest rates or technical debates on monetary policy. According to the Bank for International Settlements, those meetings are real crisis simulations, global collapse exercises. They test scenarios that just 5 years ago would have seemed absurd. A planet where the dollar loses its crown. And it's that nightmare that now keeps awake the men who control the world's money. And here's the most striking part. Names like Christine Lagarde and Jerome Powell are no longer debating if that transition will happen, but when. Internal documents from those meetings show that central banks have already designed detailed plans to steer global trade without depending on the dollar. The US government knows it, but you won't hear about this on the evening news. To speak of it publicly would be to admit that the financial empire of the dollar has already begun to crack, and there's evidence everywhere. The 2025 global survey from the World Gold Council shows that 73% of central banks plan to reduce their dollar reserves within the next 5 years. They wouldn't do that if they believed the US currency would remain strong. On the contrary, they're preparing for a drastic change in its value and influence. Meanwhile, the Bank for International Settlements is already guiding its members to develop digital alternatives to the dollar in their innovation laboratories. What used to be theory is now execution. But the most surprising thing is that none of this is speculation. The transition has already begun, and the signs are everywhere, especially in the East. While the West is still debating whether digital money is trustworthy, China has already made it a reality. Today, millions of Chinese people buy breakfast, pay for the subway, and receive their salaries with money that exists only as code. According to the People's Bank of China, the digital yuan has already moved more than 7 trillion yuan in transactions, the equivalent of almost 1 trillion US dollars, without passing through any of the traditional banks that have dominated the financial world for centuries. To put that in perspective, in just 12 months, China's digital transaction volume has nearly quadrupled, jumping from 1.88 trillion to 7 trillion yuan. Workers in 17 provinces already receive their wages in digital currency. Students pay university fees with their phones. The country has built a parallel monetary system, while the rest of the world was still debating whether to trust PayPal. And the most unsettling part, China is not alone in this race. In Europe, the European Central Bank has accelerated the timetable for the digital euro, far beyond what had been publicly announced. While Western media focuses on inflation and interest rate headlines, technical teams in Frankfurt are testing systems capable of supporting the entire European economy with programmable money. A currency that exists only in the digital realm, controlled and traceable in real time. It's the kind of revolution that changes not only the economy, but the very meaning of financial freedom. Now imagine the impact of this on your life. Today, to send money abroad, you pay absurd fees and wait days for a transfer. These new systems solve everything in seconds, from one continent to another, with no need for intermediary banks. According to the Bank for International Settlements itself, the project known as M-Bridge has already reached minimum viable product status, meaning it can process real transactions between central banks in real time. Yes, this is happening right now, as you read these words. And this movement is not small. Russia and Iran have already closed large energy deals using cryptocurrency-based settlement systems designed precisely to avoid the dollar. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar flows of raw materials passing through a financial architecture that treats the US currency as if it simply didn't exist. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is building a payment bridge connecting its members without touching the SWIFT system, the same one that has processed our international payments for decades. Brazil, for example, has already created direct connections between PIX, India's financial network, and China's digital system. Today, 23 countries are already processing international payments through systems where the dollar is optional, not mandatory. And that's precisely what makes this revolution unstoppable. Technology keeps evolving, while the traditional banking system remains stuck in the 1970s, using protocols created before the internet even existed. Each new digital platform is faster, safer, and more efficient. And as that happens, US dominance begins to look like a distant memory, the echo of an empire that once believed itself eternal. These new systems use artificial intelligence and quantum cryptography to guarantee levels of security and speed that traditional banks simply cannot match. And the most impressive thing is that even central banks themselves have realized something deeper. Digital currencies don't just replace old money. They create new economic relationships, new mechanisms of power. When money becomes code, whoever controls the code controls global trade. And now, for the first time in modern history, that control is slipping out of the hands of the United States. Let me give you a simple example. Today, the economic alliance known as BRICS represents 45% of the world's population and more than 28% of total global GDP. This coalition, formed by countries that for decades were treated as peripheral, is joining forces to reduce the importance of the dollar in international trade. And the most symbolic part of all this is that even Saudi Arabia, the country that sustained the petrodollar system for half a century, has begun selling oil in alternative currencies. The nation that once made the dollar the world's currency is now paving the way to move away from it. Now imagine this scenario. You plan a trip to Europe next year, counting on your dollars being accepted everywhere. But when the time comes, European companies prefer euros, because it helps them avoid the fees and delays associated with dollar transactions. What was once global begins to turn local. What was once dominant becomes just one option among many. And when confidence shifts, power shifts with it. Money always follows efficiency, not nostalgia. According to the Atlantic Council, BRICS nations already move over $100 billion in energy each year without touching the US system. Russia sells oil to China and receives yuan, which are immediately used to buy Chinese products. India pays for Russian oil in rupees, and Moscow uses that money to import Indian pharmaceuticals. All of this happens beyond Washington's reach. Each transaction is a small cut in the dollar's old hegemony. And together, they bleed the empire slowly, silently, but irreversibly. What makes this even more concerning is the military and financial coordination behind the shift. The BRICS nations aren't just building a new monetary system, they're also preparing to defend it. They conduct joint exercises simulating coordinated responses to economic sanctions and financial attacks. It's as if the world were rehearsing a silent war, a war fought not with bombs, but with codes, cables, and algorithms. The battlefield is now invisible, and currency is the new weapon. These countries have also created parallel institutions mirroring the entire Western financial infrastructure. The new development bank, for example, has already approved more than $200 billion in infrastructure projects without involving the US system. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank processes payments through networks independent of New York and London. Highways, bridges, and power plants are being built across 3 continents with money that never passes through American institutions. And that changes everything, because each of those projects is one less brick in the wall of the US financial empire. Think of the implications. Each new trade deal settled outside the dollar removes another piece from the chessboard, where America has always played with an advantage. For decades, US power came not only from its weapons, but from the world's dependence on its currency. Now, that dependence is being systematically dismantled, contract by contract, country by country. And the deepest blow comes from where almost no one is looking: gold reserves. According to the World Gold Council, the central banks of BRICS nations are synchronizing their gold purchases to maximize impact on the global reserve composition. In 2024 alone, more than 1,000 tons of the metal were purchased, the 3rd consecutive record in 3 years. When one central bank increases its reserves, others follow suit in a chain reaction. It's a silent dance of power that alters the structure of the global market. Regional commodity platforms already move more than $2 trillion a year through systems that completely ignore the dollar. And this directly affects our daily lives. The oil that heats homes, the food that fills supermarket shelves, and the metals used in our smartphones are now traded in alternative currencies. Each of these transactions weakens US dominance a little more. The world is literally rebuilding itself around a new economic axis, one that no longer depends on US authorization. This isn't the end of the dollar as a currency, but it is the end of the dollar as a symbol of power. And that difference changes the entire story. Now imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that your company has restructured its entire international operation, so it no longer depends on the dollar. Seems unlikely. It's already happening. Large corporations are saving millions by migrating their business operations to alternative systems beyond America's reach. German car manufacturers, for example, are signing multi-billion-dollar deals with Chinese partners entirely in euros and yuan. These aren't isolated experiments, they're structural transformations. Entire production lines that will soon manufacture the electric vehicles we'll see on the streets are already operating without any dollar involvement. The savings from eliminating currency conversions amount to hundreds of millions per year, and that efficiency changes everything. Because when the world's largest companies can operate better without using dollars, what happens to global demand for them? And when demand falls, value falls too. That affects everyone's purchasing power. Gas, bread, your smartphone. Everything starts to cost more while our money buys less. And that's how empires end. Not with explosions, but with a slow, silent erosion of their symbolic value. The effects are even more evident in the energy sector. According to recent reports, Russia's energy exports to China and India already exceed $100 billion a year in deals that completely ignore the US system. The oil that fuels gas stations may have been paid in yuan or rupees, currencies that no longer obey the logic of the petrodollar. That means the US influence over global energy prices is disappearing. And when fuel is no longer priced in dollars, the power it represented evaporates as well. Now think about your savings, your retirement fund, or the college fund for your children. Central banks are changing their reserve strategies in ways that directly affect those funds. Poland has increased its gold reserves from 13% to 20% in just 2 years. Turkey, Kazakhstan, and the Czech Republic have followed the same path. These moves aren't temporary adjustments. They're a deep restructuring, a coordinated withdrawal from the dollar-based system. What was once considered the safest asset in the world is now being viewed with suspicion. The African Development Bank, for instance, has already approved $50 billion in projects explicitly structured to avoid using the US currency. Highways, plants, and telecom networks are being built across the continent with money that never touches the financial system dominated by Washington. That means the infrastructure of the future, both physical and digital, is being built on a new paradigm. One in which the United States is no longer at the center. The world is learning to function without asking Washington's permission. And the movement doesn't stop there. The world's major shipping companies have discovered that accepting payments in multiple currencies is not only possible, it's more profitable. The cargo ship that brings goods to your city may have been paid for in euros or local currencies, eliminating the conversion costs that used to be built into every price you paid. Even universities have begun to change. European and Asian institutions now manage their finances without touching the dollar-based system. That means international education, which for so long depended on the US currency, is freeing itself from it. Corporate treasuries are also adapting to this new multi-currency reality. Companies doing business in BRICS countries maintain parallel financial systems, optimized to deal with local currencies. These structures allow operations to continue, even if the dollar-based system becomes inaccessible or too expensive. A silent insurance policy against the collapse of the old monetary order. And the most curious thing, is that this change isn't ideological, it's practical. It's simply more efficient, cheaper, and faster. Financial market professionals describe this transformation as a profound shift in mindset. Just 5 years ago, any transaction outside the dollar system required a special justification. Today, it's the opposite. Dollar-based transactions are the ones that need to be explained. Banks and corporations now ask themselves why anyone would keep choosing the slower and more expensive method when there are faster, safer, and more agile alternatives. The cracks in the dollar's hegemony are no longer theoretical. They are operational realities that directly affect prices, investments, and the economic future of those who still trust the old system. Meanwhile, construction teams on 3 continents are building the backbone of a new global financial infrastructure. Undersea fiber optic cables are being installed along the floor of the Indian Ocean, connecting Asia, Africa, and the Middle East without passing through the old communication hubs of the West. These cables don't just carry data, they carry transactions, settlements, and trade agreements, all beyond US oversight. They are the new arteries of global commerce, and each one slightly reduces the reach of US influence. And the most alarming part is that most Americans don't even know this structure already exists. While the public is distracted by political debates and social media, the rest of the world is building the foundations of a financial system capable of functioning perfectly without the dollar. It's as if we're watching, in real time, the birth of a new economic order, but with our eyes pointed in the wrong direction. And by the time we notice, the world will have already completely changed. Today, a large share of international transactions still passes through systems that the United States can monitor or influence. But that's changing fast. These new financial networks are creating global trade routes that completely bypass US supervision. America's ability to track, block, or interfere with international money flows is being systematically bypassed. Each new connection link is a thread breaking between the old world and the new one. A world in which power is quietly spreading in every direction. In Singapore, for example, the largest clearing and settlement center in Asia is rising, built on artificial land reclaimed from the sea. When completed, the building will process trillions of dollars in transactions per year, without ever passing through New York or London. The new infrastructure is designed to operate autonomously, and more importantly, without relying on the dollar. While Americans wonder why their international transfers take so long and cost so much, the rest of the world is finalizing systems capable of resolving payments in real time in any currency. Hong Kong, once a symbol of Western financial power, is now the epicenter of a silent revolution. Its new data centers host the technical infrastructure, supporting completely independent international payment systems. According to the Bank for International Settlements, these centers already maintain real-time connections with central banks across Asia and the Middle East, enabling instant settlements 24 hours a day. It's as if the financial heart of the planet had begun beating outside the body of those who always controlled it. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank recently inaugurated its new settlement unit with representatives from 57 countries. That event was symbolic, a celebration of the birth of a system that no longer needs Western institutions to finance global development. highways, ports, bridges, and power plants across Asia and Africa are now being built with money flowing through independent channels. And the more these channels multiply, the weaker the old system becomes. The dollar, once the lifeblood of global trade, is now becoming just another fluid among many. Even the insurance market has undergone a silent revolution. Lloyd's of London, one of the world's most traditional institutions, now offers insurance to Asian companies against dollar volatility, not the other way around. It's a complete inversion of what was unthinkable only a few years ago. Global finance is rapidly drifting away from dollar-centered models, reorganizing around multiple poles. It's a historic realignment, and it's happening before our eyes. Yet almost no one is paying attention. The scale of investments in this parallel system is enormous, and it should worry any attentive American. Conservative estimates indicate that more than $200 billion have already been allocated to building a new global financial infrastructure, designed specifically to reduce dependence on the dollar. And what's most intriguing is that this isn't speculative investment. It's practical spending. Cables, servers, data centers, payment networks, and real contracts, all operating quietly outside the Western system. Each new component is one less piece of US dominance. What makes this revolution unstoppable is its pragmatic nature. As trade grows among non-Western economies, the need for an independent financial infrastructure becomes inevitable. The world needs mechanisms that allow fast, cheap, and secure transactions. And if the current systems were built to serve only those who print dollars, then new systems must be born, and they are. The foundation of a post-dollar financial system is no longer being planned. It's being built before our eyes. Every cable laid across the ocean, every server activated, every bilateral agreement signed between nations outside the US orbit reduces the world's dependence on the monetary system that sustained America's lifestyle for more than a century. With each new advance, the question changes. It's no longer if the dollar will lose its dominance, but when and how fast. That subtle change in language, noticeable even in official statements from central banks, shows that the world has already accepted the inevitable. The monetary empire of the dollar has reached its turning point. Public speeches have changed. Diplomatic guarantees about preserving dollar-based relationships have disappeared. Promises to maintain the international financial architecture have been replaced by more technical, pragmatic language. Central bankers now speak of post-dollar scenarios with the same ease they once discussed interest rates, and that is the clearest sign that the game has changed. When institutions start treating change as routine, the future has already been decided. The rest is just a timeline. Financial stress tests have also changed. 3 years ago, simulations asked what would happen if dollar-based systems stopped working. Today, the scenario is the opposite. It assumes alternatives to the dollar already exist and function, and the focus is on optimizing transitions between different digital and regional currencies. The gears of the new financial world are turning, while the old system pretends nothing has changed. But the truth is, the point of no return is already behind us. According to the Atlantic Council's tracker, by 2026, central bank digital currencies will reach interoperability across more than 40 countries. This isn't a prediction. It's a tested and validated technical schedule. While many people are still figuring out how to use Apple Pay, 40 nations are coordinating the launch of monetary systems designed to operate without the dollar. What was once an experiment limited to China has now become a global race for control of the future of money. Training programs for central bankers have changed radically. They no longer study monetary theory or economic models. They are being trained to manage multi-currency transitions and ensure stability during periods of global reserve rebalancing. This is not hypothetical preparation. It's practical, objective, and ongoing. New international trade agreements signed in the last 18 months already include local currency settlement clauses as the standard, not the exception. The world is no longer thinking about alternatives to the dollar. It's implementing them. Now, financial emergencies can be resolved in a matter of hours. BRICS nations maintain active currency swaps and coordinated intervention mechanisms to provide instant liquidity during monetary crises. These systems are not prototypes. They are operational tools, tested in joint exercises and maintained in a constant state of readiness. Money, once a symbol of static power, has become a dynamic, autonomous, and decentralized flow. And for the first time in modern history, the dollar is no longer at the center of that movement. The digital infrastructure of these new economies creates its own gravitational force. It's like a new planet forming beside the old one, slowly pulling everything around it. When alternative systems can move trillions in annual volume, offer stability in times of crisis, and operate with superior efficiency, resisting them stops being an option. It becomes a loss. And the world, guided by the logic of efficiency, always migrates toward where there's less friction. The dollar, once synonymous with trust, is beginning to be seen as an expensive, bureaucratic, obsolete obstacle. And here we reach the inevitable point. The question is no longer whether the dollar will lose its global dominance, but how fast that transition will occur, and whether the United States can adapt. Because when global trade begins to function more efficiently without the dollar, clinging to it is like insisting on sending a fax in a world that communicates through artificial intelligence. The new financial system isn't coming, it's already here. And most people haven't even noticed yet. Imagine waking up in 2030. You decide to take that dream trip to Europe. But this time, there's no need to exchange currency or pay abusive fees. Your bank makes the conversion instantly, in seconds, at rates lower than any exchange house. European companies prefer payments in local currencies. They're faster, cheaper, and more stable. You shop, travel, consume, and without realizing it, you're already living in a world that has moved beyond the dollar. What once symbolized power is now just a relic of a bygone era. The same happens with the coffee you drink in the morning, the parts in your phone, and the energy that lights your home. All of it flows through trade systems where the dollar is merely an option, no longer the standard. And that changes everything. Because when money loses the privilege of being indispensable, it also loses the psychological power it once exercised over the world. The American empire doesn't fall all at once. It dissolves slowly, replaced by a new network of invisible, decentralized, and uncontrollable forces. In this new reality, digital currencies operate with a level of coordination unimaginable for previous generations. When there's instability in Asian markets, Automatic protocols activate in multiple countries at once. Monetary flows adjust in real time based on shared algorithms between central banks. Volatility decreases, regional economies integrate, and trade becomes more efficient. But along with that stability comes something unsettling: the loss of the illusion of control. Money ceases to be a national tool and becomes a global organism, alive and constantly evolving. This transformation brings both gains and losses. The world becomes fairer for some, more uncertain for others. Small nations gain a voice. Empires lose their throne. The dollar still exists, but now it's just one of many languages of money. And the United States, long accustomed to dictating the rules, will have to learn to survive in a game it no longer controls. Power, once concentrated in the hands of a few, is now dissolving among the many. And that redistribution changes the logic of the entire planet. In the end, this story isn't just about economics. It's about the end of an era and the birth of another. The paper that once symbolized wealth is now just the relic of a civilization that believed itself eternal. The post-dollar world is already here, silent, efficient, and irreversible. And maybe, when we look back, we'll realize that the empire wasn't destroyed by weapons, but by something much simpler: humanity's pursuit of efficiency, freedom, and power. The collapse didn't begin with an explosion. It began with a click. Congratulations on making it this far. Most people give up before the end, and that says a lot about you. It means you're not just watching a video about economics, but trying to understand what truly moves the world's chessboard. Few people care about this, because seeing beyond the headlines requires courage. The courage of someone who prefers raw truth to comfortable illusion. If you made it this far, congratulations. You belong to the small group that truly seeks to understand what drives the world. Subscribe, like, and share this content so more people can wake up to the silent changes transforming the global economy.